Today I'm in conversation with Emily May Barlow, who is a registered mental health nurse and nurse educator. She is currently working as a lecturer in mental health nursing. Hi, Emily May, and welcome. Good morning. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about why speaking in this series is important to you.
Yeah, so one quote that I have aligned myself to since having this experience is one from Brené Brown, which is vulnerability is not winning or losing, it's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. And I think, as I'll probably cover later on in the discussion, vulnerability is a trait that when I've felt it, I've associated with being weak. And on a personal level, this experience and this conversation is about moving forward myself from attitudes that haven't served me historically. And I've got no control over the outcome of today's discussion. And that makes me feel very vulnerable. But I do think that I've got a story to tell that could hopefully benefit the mental health nursing community in particular. So my presentation and my experience of mental health wasn't typical. It was an acute presentation of depersonalization or dissociation, as it's sometimes known. And this kind of clinical experience is not usually seen as a phenomena on its own. It's usually seen as a symptom of something else. So I think it's really important to share stories that are out with the norm, and all stories, but mine in particular is just a little bit different. So I wanted to kind of put it out there.
Well, that's really great, and that Brené Brown quote is wonderful, and it is about courage, and it shouldn't take courage. That's the thing, but it does when there's so much stigma around, unfortunately. And this is part of what this series is about, for us to really challenge that and open up these conversations. So thank you so much for speaking about your experience. I wondered if you'd like to begin by telling us a little bit about your first experience of dissociation.
Yeah, so the first time I experienced it was in February last year, 2019. And I'd had quite a lot of stresses building up over the previous year, but there was nothing that I didn't feel that I could handle. I felt I was in control of everything. I didn't feel any different to myself or my usual way of operating. I guess what I'm alluding to, there was no kind of trigger and an immediate warning sign that something big is about to happen. But I was on shift in a forensic mental health ward. And then I had this realization that I had died, and I couldn't recollect when it had happened or how it had happened. So as I'm on shift, I start to become an observer of myself, and I'm watching myself interacting with colleagues and completing paperwork. And it didn't feel like I was a participant in any of those activities, which was absolutely terrifying. And there was quite a disinhibited quality to the experience as well. And my thoughts kind of didn't feel like my own thoughts that I would normally have. So I kind of gave it some time to pass, but it didn't. It kind of just intensified. I'd taken myself into a lone office to just kind of get myself together. But I found that having less stimuli kind of just allowed me to absorb myself in it even more so. So I went to my senior charge nurse, and I told her that I died, and I was weeping all the way through the disclosure. I was very upset about it, and she drove me home, and it was a 45-minute car journey, which I can't recollect, and I later learned that I had to GPS the directions because I just couldn't. I was so disorientated, I didn't know where I was or what was happening. And she left me in the care of my best friend, who luckily is also a mental health nurse, and she was able to take me straight to the GP for an emergency appointment. And when I got there, all I could tell him was that my mouth was dry, and it was so overwhelming and so unbearable. And I remember bits of the conversation. He was asking me again and again, and it was all I could say. And I was thinking, what else is this man wanting me to say? He doesn't know how concerning my dry mouth is, and I've died. So this was like a further confirmation that this is a sign of death. I was really lucky that my friend was with me, and she was able to articulate what kind of person who I usually am and how I usually function. And I must have told her bits and pieces of what I was experiencing. So I had this pressure in my throat. I was really, really cold, and I felt like time was going really, really slowly. And I wasn't really able to follow conversations at all. My concentration and my attention was like really, really poor. So my functioning had just really deteriorated rapidly in the space of a couple of hours. So that was my kind of first experience.
Wow, I mean that's incredibly powerful, and I imagine quite frightening for you. And then to have your friend there, to be able to speak to the charge nurse, to be able to have your friend there to take you to the GP and assist you in that conversation at that point. And
Yeah.
did you have other experiences of dissociation after that first one? And if so, what were they like?
Yeah, so I didn't know it at the time. I kind of had no idea what was happening, but I was going to have many more subsequent experiences of it in the coming months. I ended up having a 3 month period of time off work where I really battled these kind of episodes on a really frequent basis. And they were all less scary than the first because on some level I kind of knew what to anticipate. Sometimes it would last for several hours. Sometimes for the rest of the day, it would often be that it would come on midday and last for the rest of the day. So I kind of got into a pattern of knowing how long this thing was going to be around for, and that would feel more like myself in the morning again. And I started to create like lots of different theories about what this meant. So on the subsequent occasions, I didn't feel like I died anymore, which was, I guess, more comforting. But I was just trying to find something that fit. So I don't know if you've watched the film The Truman Show, but that was
Yeah.
really powerful to me. And I was like, this is something's going on. This is the kind of directors messing with me in some way. Or I thought I was in some kind of Black Mirror episode. But I didn't fully embrace myself in it. It wasn't like it was a truly intact delusion. It was more that I was trying to test out theories for what would fix. It was just so incongruous with who I was and how I usually operated, and I just couldn't make sense at all of what this experience was. Its onset was very sudden. So some days I could have nothing, and then other times it would just come on, and I could be at the gym, or it could have been when I was visiting work or at home. Or out shopping, so it wasn't there was particular stimuli that would bring it on. There was kind of no pattern to it at all, so I couldn't really tell you what would bring it on again. It just kind of happened. And then each time I was fully embraced in it, and I never really got a handle on how to bring myself around from it. So I tried lots of different grounding techniques, and whilst I might have found them soothing, this experience was still very real for me, and it never kind of brought me out. Get some of the symptoms of it while you're kind of experiencing it. I don't trust any of my memories at all. I've got amnesia for parts of my life, and that part always kind of made me panic, as I couldn't really identify what was real and what wasn't. And when I would talk about things, I would kind of recount a lot of times, is this real, and kind of safety seeking with people I knew to clarify what was going on. My thoughts all felt really, really poignant as well. So the way I kind of describe it, I don't know if you've ever been on the kind of cusp of consciousness when you're about to fall asleep, and you kind of become aware that you're losing control over your thoughts as you kind of enter into a dream. So your thoughts kind of, it doesn't feel like your typical consciousness, but you know it's your brain, and this it felt so powerful. And then there was times when I would just write all of them down for hours and hours and hours. And then when the next time would come where I was kind of more lucid and read through them, it was just nonsense, like absolute nonsense. And it was like such a disconnect between how much emphasis I placed on it at the time to afterwards being like, oh, actually, this isn't making any sense. This isn't some kind of realization. The other thing I was pretty preoccupied, as I alluded to in my first experience, was my bodily sensations. So I am someone who has been terrible at mindfulness over the year. I kind of rush through life like, oh yes, that's beautiful. Oh yes, that smells lovely. On I go. And I became terrible. I've practiced for years at trying to like get myself grounded. But I was so hypersensitive to all of my bodily sensations. So, and I thought it was all really powerful. So I remember one time eating a kiwi fruit, and I've got a huge voice note recording while I'm describing the taste and the texture and how the weight of the kiwi fruit felt in my mouth. It was kind of the same with sound, or if I would carry a rucksack and it was happening, I would be so aware of the weight of the rucksack. And all of that was completely exhausting. So there was such a cognitive load going on just to be able to do the day-to-day, because I was so overwhelmed. It's like seeing everything for the first time and being amazed by it. Yeah.
That's so much to take in, isn't it? And goodness me,
Yeah.
and I wondered when you think about your experiences of dissociation, and when you think about yourself as a mental health nurse, and what reflections have you had about your profession and mental health nursing in particular when you think about this experience?
Yeah, that's something I have considered a lot, because of this experience. I was 10 years into my career when I first had this experience, and I ended up getting support through kind of non-medical route. It was with private counselling, who kind of allowed me to look at myself in a different framework that I'd ever perceived myself before, and helped me to identify that I really did have a very high benchmark for what I wanted of myself, and I needed to be together, and I needed to be resilient and resourceful and unbreakable, and I'd achieved quite a lot in my career. So all of these values were really paying off. They were, and objectively, I think people thought, there's someone who really beats herself up to get where she wants to go, but she achieves things, and that's kind of, there's nothing to be challenged there, because look how it's serving her. It was really functional. So none of this had ever been challenged at any point in my career. And I look back on my experience of supervision. So there was a couple of different types I've kind of engaged with during my career, whether that was individual and clinical supervision or managerial supervision, and we've also had group supervision. But we were never able to select who our supervisor was. So that was either randomly assigned or it was your manager, of which you can imagine there's probably some sort of agenda or dynamic there that means you might not feel comfortable talking about your deepest, darkest feelings. And the conversations that I've had in supervision have largely orientated around the clinical practice. It was never about looking at myself and how I'm impacted by the work that I did. And it was almost like another space to be a martyr, actually, about how well we're doing. And nurses are very kind of, we're all in this together, and it's going to be tough, and we're all going to get through this, and we don't break down kind of attitude. And I think it's only since I've worked with people who aren't in the nursing profession, I'm thinking about counsellors in particular, and I've seen how holistic and how truly reflective their career is in education, and then afterwards during when they're practicing, and the kind of supervision they have to engage with, and how that really does tap into them thinking about themselves as a person, and how their work and how their ways of operating kind of impacts them in a positive and negative way, that I've thought, I've never asked any of those conversations about myself at all. And it's only since I've done that and I've thought, oh, actually, you've been a perfectionist and you've been beating yourself up for success, whether you've enjoyed activities or not, and you kind of looked at life as kind of a tit life of experiences and things you've got to achieve, and ran through them kind of tick, 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 tick. I've got a house, I've done extra study, I'm a homeowner, and you've never kind of sat down and looked around and thought about what all of this means for you, or considered some of your more difficult experiences and how that's going to impact on the way that you're feeling, and that you haven't got to kind of just ignore it all and go, this is another challenge I can overcome. You're allowed to break down a little bit and say, okay, this was really difficult, and I might not be able to do some extra study at the moment, or work might just be work for a little bit, rather than putting 10,000% in and taking on all these extra projects. I guess what I'm trying to get at, I've never been respondent to my own needs before. I had a bar and I met it all the time, regardless of whatever was going on for me. So I think now and I think with the support of the counsellor I went to see, we kind of contextualise this experience as being, you were never going to slow down anyway, and you needed something pretty big and powerful to almost pop you on your head and turn you off for a little bit, so that you could rest and calm down and give your mind and give your body the space that it's probably been craving all of its adult life, because you've not had a rest yet. And whether that is how dissociation works or not, there's not a huge body of evidence on it at the moment, but that really did help me to kind of frame my understanding of why this had happened to me, and I guess to accept some of those values like vulnerability and allowing myself to be kinder to myself, because we all need it, and none of us are machines. Even we say that all the time, we know that, but there was always this secret value, kind of like, but I am. I can do it. No one else can, but I think I can. And that was a huge thing to let go, to be like, you are just human, and that's okay.
Wow, that it took something powerful like that that's something I resonate with a bit from my own breakdown, is
Yeah,
that I think that things happen for a reason. And my breakdowns had great meaning for me. And it's something that really helped me to, I mean, I wouldn't wish the pain on anyone, but
yeah,
it's something that really kind of stopped everything,
yeah,
and made me attend to something that I needed to attend to that was going on in my internal world that I needed to have a look at.
absolutely.
And sometimes I think I don't know if it would have taken almost anything less than that. It felt
Yeah,
like hitting a brick wall. So I
no,
don't know if that I was thinking about that thing.
yeah, and I don't know if it's at different people and the way they're operating. They need different severities of experience to make them kind of shake them up and look at things a different way. But as you're kind of saying for yourself, I think I needed something this big to kind of shut me down, to make me reevaluate who I was as a person. And because the way I was functioning was surfing so fruitful, it needed something so dramatic to be able to say, actually, this isn't the way you should be living your life. This isn't going to serve you long term. I think I did need it, and I think it's been uh, one of the best things that's happened to me. And as you're saying, I wouldn't wish it on anybody else, but I think the things that I've learned about myself during that time and since, and how much now I check in with myself and challenge myself when I am in everything that I'm doing, and I think about the consequences to myself, short term and long term. And why do you want to do this? Is this just a default schema and a way of operating so that you can achieve something, or is this going to bring you joy, or is this going to serve you on a deeper level? And I think I don't think I would have got there lightly without something as significant as this.
It's really fantastic to hear your story, and I hope that anybody watching who wants to come into the mental health professions, particularly into mental health nursing, can who may be wondering, goodness, I have some lived experience of mental health
Yeah,
difficulties myself, may feel really inspired by hearing about your story, and just hearing about just being able to have a conversation about these kinds of things, because I do think something very interesting happens when you become a kind of a registered mental health professional that actually shuts down those conversations because of fear of
absolutely.
fitness to practice issues and all sorts of things, when actually, when we engage with those difficulties, when we're able to say, when we're met by a compassionate environment who can
Yeah,
listen and understand, and we are able to seek the help that we need and take the time off, and all of that is not received in any kind of punitive way or judged negatively, that's competence in action, right there. That's brilliant practice. And we are just all, as you say, human within this workforce. We're not some kind of weird other.
no,
you know
you're right, and it's kind of,
Population.
it shouldn't take this much. This shouldn't. I guess this shouldn't feel this brave at this where we're at in the mental health world, that professionals are talking about lived experience and putting it in a public forum, and just letting people learn from it. But it does. It feels really significant, and I guess that reflects the culture and the stigma that is very much prevalent in our workforce every single day. Otherwise, this would just be, you would have thousands of people signing up to say, oh, that I've had a little bit of that, because there will be thousands of people out there who might be sitting there thinking that they've got to keep it to themselves and not access support.
I was talking with another contributor to the series about young people who have come through the Time to Change campaigns,
Yeah,
have much more open in schools now about speaking around mental health and emotional well-being. And I think when they come into the professions, which they will, which we always have done, people who have had mental health difficulties come up through CAMS and into the professions. We've always been here, we always will be, we always have been. I think in the future, I wonder whether things will change for the better. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I have thought about it, and I've thought about schooling in particular. It's kind of 15 years since I left school, which isn't a huge period of time, but it seems like the conversations that are going on in school are a lot more focused on well-being, rather than, I guess, to reflect on my own values that I described about being a perfectionist and high achieving. That was definitely instilled in me from a young age, in the kind of the way the schooling system operated, and the highest achievers were the ones who were celebrated the most and kind of always in competition. And I wonder if those kind of values are changed in the schooling system from a young age when people are developing formative ideas about who they are and their value. I wonder if that will mean that there'll be less people later on who are coming with as many troubles, and if they have got any difficulty, they're going to be able to talk about it in a more free and open way and have the dialogue to be able to do that without carrying any shame attached to it. And it feels like a very normal conversation to have with anyone. I would hope so. I would certainly hope so.
I would hope so too. And, there are lots of people out there doing this work, right now around stigma in general, around mental health difficulties, and more people speaking up within the mental health professions about it. And what I really like, which I've always valued at Integrate Mental Health, is the fact that it's open across the professions. It started with clinical psychology because I'm a clinical psychologist, and that's the field that I knew, and I didn't feel that confident about speaking outside of that. But more and more, kind of over time, it welcomed in other people from mental health nursing, social work, who work in mental health, psychiatry. So yeah, I think let's collaborate. Let's do more.
Definitely. But the kind of things that we're talking about binds us more than it separates us. And I know our professions, we've all got different things that we focus on and different outcomes and I guess targets, for want of a better word. We've all got different ways of operating and things that we need to achieve. But actually, at the middle of it all, we're all helping people, and that's people's well-being, and we're all people with well-being. So surely that connects us more than any of the differences of our clinical profession do.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the strength of a multidisciplinary team, right there. I think also, isn't it?
Yeah.
But maybe we can also, do the behind the scenes stuff together too. That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing your story and for being in conversation about this. I've found it brilliant and inspiring to listen to you. And
thank you very much
for
inviting me. And thank you for being serious. I do think it's really, really important. And if anybody else is out there and feels like they're not able to share their story, hopefully it gives a bit of confidence to at least know that there's people out there who've had that similar experience and that you're not in this alone at all.
Yeah. Definitely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.